Hey guys, Professor Matt here, back again to give you an overview of Chapter 12. This has to do with issues and crises. Now, a lot of times when people think about public relations, they're thinking about PR people coming in and helping to manage a crisis. Okay, so in addition to like media relations, a lot of people equate what we do to this. Now, this is one of the highest level, high stakes things that we can do in public relations. Okay, managing a crisis, helping an organization get through a crisis, so it can recover, get back to selling products and services, and actually rebuilding trust with its customers and stakeholders is a big part of what we do, and it's a really important thing that we do. So this chapter is great. I don't know. So it starts with the VW icon. If you guys have heard that story a few years ago, they called it Dieselgate, when VW actually they faked their emissions protocols. They lied about it. It was a huge deal, and they lost billions of dollars in fines and customers and so forth. I would encourage you to look at that case study because it's recent and it's not good. So part of a huge value what we can bring to our organizations, in addition sort of the managing relationships, right, proactively, is helping to manage conflict. The book starts with this case that happened back in 2009. United Airlines, there was a band named Sons of Maxwell. They were on a flight with United Airlines, and before they were getting off the plane, going to deplane, they looked outside the window and they saw one of the baggage handlers throw one of their guitars and it landed on the tarmac. The band later on, after they didn't think about it, but they got to their hotel after taking a road trip to their next venue, the guy opened the guitar case and saw that his Taylor guitar, really nice guitar, was broken. They called up United and said, "Hey, listen, you broke our guitar." And United said, "Hey, I'm sorry. The policy is at 24 hours. Looks like you guys didn't respond within the 24 hours. So there's nothing that we can do." Sons of Maxwell decided to write a song about it, and they posted it called United Breaks Guitars, and it went viral in the summer of 2009 and really was a milestone in crisis communication or crisis management in public relations. All it took was one group, because of the platform of social media, to cause a major crisis for United Airlines. United, of course, they responded, they changed their policies and so forth. But what we realized as a profession in 2009 is that it churned the sort of the evolution of public relations, the historical era, I guess. It moved us into the era of consumer activism. Like, consumers have the power to make things miserable for you if you don't do things right. Okay, so what we want to do then in public relations and crisis management is to be proactive and to do the right thing. Remember, we're in the relationship building business. Don't do anything that's going to undermine the trust in these relationships. Okay, so there's a lot of great stuff in this, but let me just take you through some of the key highlights. One is this notion of contingency theory, and that comes up a lot. This theory suggests that the best course of action in any situation depends on the specifics of that situation. You've got internal factors, such as, like, what is your expertise in dealing with crises? What's your budget? Who are there internal impediments? Because you can have people working for an organization that clearly are arrogant about it, say, "Oh, no one can touch us, we're going to be fine." That can really hinder your crisis response. And there's external things, like, who is the group that you've agreed? What are they doing? Are they taking this to the next level? Okay, so contingency theory says that this is a fluid and dynamic thing. When you're facing a crisis, you have to realize that your response right now is given what you know right now, but because it's fluid and dynamic, you will need to adjust in the course of this. Now, when we talk about the response to that. There really is there are two poles. Okay, one is pure accommodation, and pure accommodation on that pole is the idea that you recognize that you've done something wrong. You've created victims. You've done something where you are fully responsible. It is now your job to make it right, and that means this is crisis communication 101. Acknowledging there's a problem, taking responsibility for it, and then saying I'm sorry genuinely, and then making amends. People need to know on your apology that you have learned your lessons. Like, why should we believe as a public that this won't happen again? Okay, so that's all part of this idea of pure accommodation. We know we've done something wrong. We need to make it right, and you need to apologize correctly. On the other side of the pole is pure advocacy. And this happens when you as an organization have been wrongly accused and maybe even extorted. There's a famous example of this when Pepsi, a number of years ago, some consumer claimed that they found a syringe in a Pepsi can. So Pepsi started this whole investigation. They looked into the whole bottling process, and they realized there's no way that even a bad actor could stick a syringe inside a Pepsi can. So they called this guy's bluff, and they knew this person was trying to extort money from the company. And they basically said, we are going to prosecute this person to the fullest extent for extortion. You know what happened? All these other people that started to pop up around the nation, oh yeah, I found a syringe in my Pepsi can. They faded away. And that was pure advocacy because they realized they were not in the wrong. Okay, and we have to play an aggressive defense at that point to say that this organization is being wrongly accused. Okay, so one poll, pure accommodation. You've done something wrong. You need to apologize for it. Other poll, pure advocacy. You're going to stick by your organization and make sure they are defended against being wrongly accused. All right, so then there's this whole idea of like managing issues. So a crisis, we know a crisis, but hopefully you are going to deal with a crisis by preventing one from happening in the first place. Okay, that's where this whole issues management comes into play. Okay, so we talk about this issues life cycle. Like how do you know where an issue is and so forth. So here's the deal. Is that there's like 4 different levels or stages for an issue. Number 1 is early potential. Okay, when a few people begin to become aware of a potential problem. Number 2, emerging, when a few more people notice and express concern. Number 3 is current crisis. When the negative impact on an organization becomes public and pressure on the organization starts to build. And then 4, dormant, just means that when the organization has no choice but to accept the long-term consequences. Okay? Here's the deal. The longer that an issue exists without being addressed, the more entrenched publics become in their opposition, and the fewer options are still available to an organization if you do not address this. So the idea with issues management is to address it early. Nip it in the bud. If you see this thing as a potential problem, deal with it as early as you can so it doesn't become a full-blown crisis. Crises are a huge drain on an organization. Financially, time and talent, right? Like all of a sudden you have to divert resources from other things to deal with a crisis. So you want to make sure that this idea of issues management, you are addressing issues long before they become a crisis. That's a huge thing, because if this could have been prevented, then your clients and boss are going to say, hey, how come you weren't on top of this? Why did we not deal with this in the very beginning? Okay. And there's a whole thing there in terms of how you do proactive issues management. I would encourage you to go through, look at that, the various steps from monitoring to identification to prioritization, analysis, strategic planning, implementation, and evaluation. Okay, so go and look at that. Look at the stages and what we're supposed to do in each one of those stages. Okay, and the last thing I want to talk about is the type of crisis that you might be dealing with, because it does make a difference in terms of the level of potential damage that could hit your organization in like what kind of a crisis it is. Okay, so the first kind of crisis is a victim crisis. And a victim crisis means that, you have been the victim of a particular situation. The classic one, 1982, Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson. Someone got into their bottling thing and they actually laced bottles of Tylenol with cyanide and people were killed. Now, Tylenol did an amazing job. Johnson & Johnson did an amazing job at handling it. First of all, they pulled all of the Tylenol off the shelves. They invented basically the kind of packaging that we have today and said, this is why it's not going to happen again. People were far less upset with Tylenol because they realized that they were a victim, right? Another kind of crisis, number two, is an accident crisis. And now accidents happen, right? That's true. You don't get quite the full pass as a victim crisis because people start to wonder, did this happen because of neglect? Are you responsible for this? So it's not, you don't get a full pass like you do a victim crisis, but accident crisis is not the worst. The worst is something that was a preventable crisis. Like you knew this was going to happen and you did nothing about it. That's the worst kind. That's the stuff that comes out in court. Like we saw an email that was sent years ago. It said the infrastructure was broken. We knew there was going to be a problem. We knew there was going to be a massive fire or a explosion or whatever it might be. People at that point get really upset as they should, right? If you have, this is where we need to do like these risk assessments as PR people. Go into a situation and say, are there things like this that could turn out to be a major crisis and the worst kind of crisis because we knew it could happen and we did nothing about it. Okay? All right, so learn those. Then it goes into some crisis response strategies. I would encourage you to look at those of things you need to kind of the various options we have, and as we do that. Okay, so lots to be said there. Great chapter, really important. It's something as you progress in your careers and you become someone who can effectively help manage a crisis, you will become super valuable. And unfortunately, there's lots of crises. Look in the paper every day of the news, and you're going to see that there's a need for PR people who know how to handle crises. All right, so that's chapter 12, right? And make sure you read that, and then also look at the PowerPoint presentation, and then take the quiz at the end of the chapter. Also participate in the post and discuss. And I'll be back next time with another overview of another chapter.